501c3 arm of Texas AFT. I do all things professional development and leadership development. And on this call with me, I have Dr. Claudia Morales, who helps me co-facilitate, and she's a consultant for the Bridges Institute and helps kind of run these professional development opportunities that we are able to offer educators across the state. This evening, we have the TRIO project-based problem solving, inquiry-based learning. And we have two phenomenal national trainers. There is just a small percentage of trainers who go through AFT's Educational Research and Dissemination Program who come out identified as national trainers at the end. And so we are lucky to have two of these individuals facilitating this tonight, and also national trainers for Texas AFT. I have Carol Villarreal, who comes from Northside ISD and Northside AFT, which is right outside of San Antonio. And then I have Rebecca Salazar Fierce. She is with El Paso AFT and teaches in El Paso ISD. So ladies, with that, I will turn it over to you all.
Welcome. Thank you for coming on this Wednesday night to join us in learning more about the TRIO inquiry-based, problem-based, and project-based learning. My name is Carol Villarreal. Like Jamie said, I am a national trainer for the Strategies for Student Success, and I am a reading specialist at a high school in Northside ISD. And I will have Rebecca go ahead and introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Salazar Fierce. I'm in El Paso ISD. This is my 18th year of teaching. And this is my 4th year working with AFT National and AFT, Texas AFT as a facilitator for professional development. I am a pre-K3 teacher. So I do dual language and monolingual, but I'm so glad to be here with you all today.
So welcome to AFT's Strategies for Student Success series. This research-based program consists of modules that address teaching and learning aspects of the classroom experience by new and veteran teachers alike. These modules can be given within 3 hours. Ours is 2 hours tonight, which creates a manageable way to connect with educators. Please make sure that you stay muted unless you're going to participate. We do want participation. We will be putting you in breakout rooms a couple times to do some small group learning. I understand it's evening time, so if you need to take a phone call, just make sure you're muted and your phones are on vibrate. Rebecca, will you put the handbook in the chat for us? So we're going to be putting the handbook in the chat, so that way if we're referring to it, you can upload, and then you can also print it off for further reference later on. So let's go ahead and take a look at our AFT mission statement. So if you look at this mission statement, one of the reasons why we as for AFT is that we don't just do political things. We also want to help teachers hone in on their teaching. So we provide professional development and learning sessions to help teachers improve their craft in a way that supports students' academic success. So let's take a look at our objectives for tonight's session. So take a look at these objectives. We're going to be looking at delineating the structural differences between the inquiry method, problem-based method, and project-based method. We're going to be looking at structure assignments for each of the trios within the research-based recommended framework in a way that fosters engagement and related skills. We will also be supporting students effectively as they work through any one of the approaches in the trio. We're also going to look at the researchers everything that we do in AFT is research-based for our professional development. We use level 3 seminal research a lot of the time, so some of these names may be familiar. Are major studies done, and seminal research are major studies done on a topic over the past 20 to 50 years. Their work has been peer tested and reviewed. You'll notice that some of the dates of the research in the handbook may seem outdated, but the research remains credible as it has withstood the test of time. If you take a look at the researchers, just real quick, if you want to put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself, do any of these look familiar to you? So which of these look familiar to you? If you want to put the name in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Okay, Brunner. Dewey, yes, definitely Dewey. I know Angela Duckworth, if you've been into any of the other trainings, we've used her work a lot on grit. We also have Kilpatrick that's used several times within our PDs. So you may see some that are newer, but some also that are seminal research. Now that we've seen some of the researchers, we have had a direct impact on the module. Let's begin by exploring one of their contributions when we're making a case for the trio in our schools. So let's take a look at this quote. A desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world. What are your thoughts on this quote? What do you think this quote means in reference to where education is headed in the future? We would love to hear your voice if you would like to unmute yourself, or you can also put it in the chat.
It seems like their world is connecting in so many different ways that if we're just viewing it from behind a desk, we're missing out.
Yes, definitely. Does anyone else have anything else they would like to add? What do you think this means based on what we talked about for our objectives? What do you think this means for the PD that we're going to be doing tonight? Needs to be more collaboration in the classroom, not just a sit and get type thing. Yes, definitely. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at what the trio is all about. I know Rebecca's having a little difficulty. Sorry about that. Thank you for being here. We gotta love technology.
I'm having issues with my audio and I can't hold on.
I don't know if I'm saying this right. Venetia, thank you for that comment. We definitely need more opportunities for students to be active in their learning environments. So yes, definitely. So if we, and I know it's not showing on the screen, but I'm just gonna go ahead and keep moving.
Project-based learning in less than
So we're going to be making a case for the trio. In this module, the structural difference between inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning, and project-based learning will be explored. But first, let's hear from key researchers on why these approaches are not only engaging and personalizing, but also necessary for students' academic growth. So you will find this research in the handbook that you can look at a different time, but we have some key researchers here. We have Duckworth, Richardson, and Brooks that all talk about the case of why the trio is important: inquiry-based, problem-based, and project-based learning. Let's see if I can share my.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. Carol?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, just making sure.
Did you want me to share my screen? Or are you having difficulty with that?
Yeah, if you don't mind,
Okay.
thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to get set up because I was not anticipating
Not
this.
ready. All right, I think I got it. Can you see it? I don't know.
Yes, I was able to see it when you
Thank you. Okay,
share
yeah, I'm
that.
not sure
There you
what
go. You're good.
happened. All right. Oh, thank you for waiting for us to do that. So just making the case for the trio, why do we need to have inquiry-based, problem-based, and project-based learning? So in our reading, if we were taking the full class, you would have been able to see through it. And we did send you the participant handbook in the chat. And we'll be sharing that out again later on just to make sure that everybody has access to it. But in the article that we are talking about, it's called Why Education Reform is Needed, and it's on page 2 of the handbook. We have researchers Duckworth, Richardson, and Brooks who are talking about why we need to have something different for our students in our classes and why we need to change things up. So in the reading, it says learning is at its peak when it can be transferred, when it's linked to learners' intrinsic motivation, and when the learner is able to have ownership of the learning. And Duckworth proposes that educators pose things students should be thinking about and what they should be encouraged to share. They should be encouraged to share what they make of it. So it shouldn't just be a cookie cutter, like this is exactly what we want you to do. So we have kind of an end in mind, but we're also allowing them to make those connections on their own. She also urges schools to become places where educators can invite students to search for understanding, appreciate uncertainty, and require responsibility. And then Richardson, who wrote this in 2019, says schools need to emphasize the learning of content, but equally important is the ability of students to see how the content applies to their everyday life, right? So the world and how they use the content to inquire about areas they are most interested in or to solve problems rather than to just simply ace a test. And that means that we're making them think. And this is a great plug for another one of our trainings, which we have, like teach them to think, right? We're not just teaching them this content by itself in isolation. We're also teaching them how to connect it and how it's going to help them in the real world. And Brooks in 1987 postulated that education reform must start with how students learn and how teachers teach, not with legislated outcomes. And so there's growing consensus that in the research community that students' learning is maximized when they can construct their own meaning. So we're not just giving them answers or questions and can be, you know, just constantly answered exactly the same. You're trying to help them find their own meaning within that. And I do want to point out that all of AFT's modules, the PD that we provide is research-based. And if you can see the dates of these researchers' work and when it was published, you'll see that this is not like all 2024. We do have research going back all the way to 1987 on this page. And that's because it's based on seminal research. So seminal research means that it's been proven time and again across time and populations. And so there's level 3 research, and that means that they've actually gone back and they've proven it. So it's not just one set place, one area, one group of people. And so we ask ourselves, what exactly is inquiry-based tasks, or what is inquiry-based learning? So with that, I'd like to share with you a video, and it's by John Spencer, who's going to be answering this question for us.
In The Order of the Phoenix, the 5th of the Harry Potter series, Dolores Umbridge takes over as the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher and instantly transforms the classroom into this textbook-based, standardized, test-focused classroom. And Harry questions whether this will prepare them for fighting against Voldemort, he who must not be named, and that's when Umbridge punishes him. And he ends up forming his own school within a school, called Dumbledore's Army. Now, Dumbledore's Army is purely inquiry-based. While Harry is the teacher, he is mostly the guide on the side, empowering students to ask questions and find the answers themselves. They rely on each other and on various spell books to solve problems and answer their questions. It is a space of experimentation. And while the process might seem messy compared to Umbridge's standardized approach, the students learn at a rapid pace because they aren't wasting their time repeating what they already know. This is an example of inquiry-based learning, although since it takes place in the UK, it's probably inquiry-based learning. I don't really know. Inquiry-based learning has existed for thousands of years. Both Socrates and Confucius used variations on their own inquiry-based format. It's a critical component to the scientific method of the early Enlightenment, and it was a core idea of both Dewey and Montessori's ideas around student-centered learning. Padaste shares a model of the 4 phases of inquiry. It starts with orientation, which is often a form of discussion. It's where they become aware of the key idea. And from there, it moves into conceptualization, where students generate questions and they define a hypothesis. This leads to an investigation phase, where students explore, experiment, and interpret data, often in a way that's flexible and dynamic. It can even seem kind of cyclical. And then finally, they move into a conclusion. Heather Banshee and Randy Bell defined 4 different types of inquiry that you can view on sort of a spectrum from teacher-centered / structured into learner-centered / open. Level 1 is confirmation inquiry, where the teacher teaches the concepts, creates the questions, and models the process for students. They basically just kind of go along with it to learn about the process. Level 2 is structured inquiry, where the teacher creates the initial set of questions and kind of shares the procedures, but then the students walk through the rest of the inquiry process by collecting and analyzing the data and drawing their own conclusions. Level 3 is guided inquiry, and this is sort of the beginning of what we typically think of as inquiry. This is where the teacher provides the initial research question or questions, but students own the research process and the experimentation. And then level 4 is open inquiry or true inquiry. Here's where students formulate their own questions, design their experiments or their research, and collect their own data or facts that they then share in their findings. Here are a few places where you as a teacher can start with inquiry-based learning. In a language arts or social studies class, you can do a Wonder Day or Wonder Week project where students develop their own questions and move through the inquiry process on their own. You can also do a Genius Hour project where students not only ask their own questions, but design their own product as well. In math, you could have students explore a concept and develop their own problems, which is one of the things I love about the What Can You Do With This process of Dan Meyer. And in science, you could do something like a science fair project or a Mythbuster style approach to testing an urban legend. The key idea though is this: if we want students to own their learning, if we want them to remain curious, if we want classrooms to be bastions of curiosity and wonder, well then we need to have something like inquiry-based learning in place so that they learn how to ask great questions, find the answers, and share their results with their peers.
So that's what inquiry-based learning is. We're kind of asking questions, we're generating questions, and based on those questions, we start our learning. And oops. Okay, now that we've kind of seen what inquiry-based learning is, there's several key components to consider when we're creating inquiry-based learning tasks. So we're going to examine some of them before we go into creating our first lesson. So when we're talking about inquiry-based learning tasks, we need to make sure that the educators can either select the topic or help students select the topic. Either way, it's got to be of interest to the students. And the very important part of the structure of designing inquiry-based tasks is the sequencing of these tasks. So for example, group work, providing a learning environment in which students hold each other accountable and for each other's learning and academic success and providing them with timely feedback. So one of the components that we do need to consider when we're creating inquiry-based learning units for our students is authenticity. So the inquiry of interest is it of interest to students, and does it allow for them to study an issue, a problem, or a question, or a topic in a way that contributes to the world's knowledge? The tasks are sequenced and sometimes individual based. So they need to make sense to them. It needs to be authentic for them. Is there academic rigor? Students deepen their knowledge on the topic and strengthen their executive functions and habits of mind, right? So when we're teaching through inquiry-based, this is what we're looking for, our academic rigor. And then there should be assessments, right? So ongoing assessments allow students to give each other feedback and set clear learning goals. And then there's range of study. So in range of study extends beyond the classroom. Students use technology, blogs, and any material that will support their learning and key teachable moments, as well as introduce students to valid versus unreliable resources. So they're designed with structure. And then we have to make sure we are sequencing those tasks. There's group work involved, and there's student accountability for their own and their classmates or their group mates as well, and provide timely feedback in order for them to know what the next steps are and what they're going to be doing next. So now that we've kind of talked about what are some components of inquiry-based learning tasks, let's talk for a moment and think about, how do you create inquiry-based questions? How do you teach kids to develop their own questions, right? Because at the end of it, them developing their own questions is going to help them to take ownership of their learning, to be able to continue and be more invested in what we're teaching them. And then how do you teach them? So how do we teach them to develop their own questions? There is something called the QFT, so the question formulation technique. And it's something that was researched, and it's something that has come up. It's also, again, another plug for one of our other modules for questioning to teach and learn. So in that module, we do talk about the QFTs, and I would like to invite you to listen to this. It's a 90-second explanation of what QFT is. Because you might have all those questions right now, like, how do we get there? How do we do this? Carol, can you check the chat really quick? Because I think somebody was asking a question.
Okay, the question was, how does one approach this when your district has a scripted curriculum? That is a good question.
It is, and I
Give
think
you some, do they give you some leeway on what you can do? Do you have time to be able to do, like, this might be like during science maybe, or during social studies? That is a really good question. That's a hard one to answer, depending on your district and how strict they are, really.
or how you can fit it into, like, when you're doing, even if it's during your assessment time, or when you're kind of ending modules and stuff like that, or maybe when you have a little extra time at the end of learning. Oh, I heard somebody she said a hard no, I think. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take a look at a 90-second explanation of what QF.
Hey there, Aaron here from InquireEd. The question formulation technique, often referred to as the QFT, was developed by the Right Question Institute as a simple step-by-step process that helps anyone produce, improve, and prioritize questions. It's a powerful strategy, and that's why we're here with a 90-second breakdown of how the QFT can work in your classroom. The QFT starts with a Q focus, the spark that jumpstarts the production of questions. The Q focus can be a statement, image, phrase, or situation, as long as it is clear and interesting enough to activate curiosity. One hard and fast rule, though: the Q focus can't be a question. Before you start producing questions, pick someone to write down and number the questions as they come. Then review the rules. Rule number 1, generate as many questions as possible. Rule number 2, do not discuss, answer, or judge any questions. Rule number 3, write down every question exactly as it is stated. Rule number 4, change any statements to questions. Take 4 to 5 minutes to produce questions using a timer to keep you on task. Once you're done, it's time to improve your questions. Set your timer for another 4 to 5 minutes, then categorize questions into open and closed, labeling each with a C or an O. Next, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of both types of questions. Finally, change one open question to closed, and vice versa. Okay, only a few more steps. First, prioritize your questions, setting the timer for 3 minutes and placing an X next to your top 3. Don't forget to discuss why you've chosen them. Afterwards, take another 2 minutes to discuss and plan your next steps, describing what you'll do with your questions. Don't forget to reflect on what you've done and what you've learned. And that's a 90-second breakdown of the QFT. Now go ask some questions.
So according to one of the resources that we shared with you in your handbook on page 5, it says it's called gradepowerlearning.com. We retain 75% of what we do versus 5% of what we hear and only 10% of what we read. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we want to talk about the inquiry based. And so when our kids start generating these questions that help guide their learning and they're more invested and they really want to take ownership over their learning, that's helping them to make sure that they're able to do something that's going to stick with them. And it's not just something that's being read to them or just something that's being told to them. And so that way we get them to retain more of that information. So I hope that that helped to solidify how we kind of get through the inquiry based, get to those good questions. So did you see when they were talking about generating questions, you just write down any question you have, and it doesn't matter how silly it is or how you don't judge them. You just let them go and let them ask whatever questions, but then they themselves can go and sort them, and they decide, are they open-ended questions? Are they higher level questions? Or is it something that we can actually go through and research and find more information on? So at this time, I would really like to invite you. We're going to go to a breakout. And within your breakout, I would like for you guys to come up with one question that you can. So you're going to develop an inquiry-based task. So you're going to think about what's something that we can ask a question about, and that's going to generate what our work is going to be. And it can be anything. So think about what your actual content area is, and we're going to give you about 7 minutes to come up with your inquiry-based task. So it can be pretty much anything, whatever you're working on. So Carol, do you have an example for your grade level for inquiry-based?
I've done one when we work on reading novels, because I'm a reading specialist, so I'm a reading teacher, and like an inquiry on I'm trying to come up with the top of my head. Sorry, you put me on the spot.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm just saying because I'm pre-K 3, so it's kind of harder to have them ask, but I'm just saying, like, even with my little ones, I know they're constantly asking questions. They're like, what is this? What's that for? How do you use it? And so a lot of times, even with the little ones, you're able to generate questions just off of something small. So then what is this? Okay, well, how do you know that it is a square? How do you know that it's a triangle? Because there's 3 sides, because there's 3 angles. Then we go from there to what other real objects are there in the world that have that same shape, a piece of pizza, or, you know, we have a cookie that's that shape. So kind of going based off of whatever your content areas, what are some inquiry-based learning tasks that you can create for your students. And remember, all we're doing is starting. We're not having you really refine them right now. We're just kind of dipping our toes into this and to starting to get to work with it, because the more that you practice it, the better you become at it. So let me just.
I have the breakout rooms done.
Oh, thank you so much, Carol.
Yes, I already did them. So I have about 2 to 3 people per group.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and open the rooms. There should be a timer for 7 minutes that will bring you back, and then we'll share out a couple ideas that you guys came up with.
Are we all back, Carol?
Looks like we've got some that are still in the wait, and I'm still showing some in the breakout rooms. They should be coming back though.
Okay.
Yeah, it takes about a minute for everyone to get back.
Close up.
I think we're all back now.
All right. So welcome back. I hope that discussion that you guys had in your breakouts really generated some really awesome inquiry-based tasks. I just really quickly want to share, I know our group kind of talked a little bit about something for social studies, and I'd like to invite James to talk a little bit about the question he came up with, and then we're gonna have the other ladies, Karina and Maria, just kind of jump in and say like what they started kind of talking about and generating more questions. Go ahead.
Uh-oh, she's throwing me into the middle of the pit here. That's all right. I'm in the middle of doing a unit on the Stone Age, and today my lesson that I'm coming home with it still in my mind is I taught them about a lot of inventions during the Mesolithic age. So I thought an inquiry-based question that I could put at the beginning of the lesson to get them thinking could be something like, which of the inventions we've learned about so far do you think was the most important and why? And I've spent a bunch of days teaching them the content about different inventions that helped humanity survive through the Ice Age, like fire, meat curing, spear throwers, hand axes, and using your natural environment to trap animals, like things like that. Baskets and music was today. But then just kind of, I was actually also thinking maybe this could be a Socratic seminar where I give them this and I have them get in groups, discuss it, and then we come back together and then the different groups have opposing viewpoints. So that's where I was getting my idea from. But I said it I say it to my school district. I said it in the breakout room. I'll say it again. It cannot be methods with no content. They've got to know what these inventions are first before they talk about them.
And I appreciate that, James, because we do need to build the content and that background before we start doing like all these methods. The kids need to have that content and they need to have the vocabulary, that background knowledge before we start doing all of this. So thank you very much. And Karina or Maria, would you like to share?
I just wanted to making sure that we include details, and one of the questions was how can we use this tool to make life better? So kind of just taking in a direction of allowing them to think forward past, what's already created, but how can they use something else in a different way, or how many different ways can you come up with a usefulness for this tool?
Thank you, Karina. I think
That's actually getting into the problem-based learning too. So you're kind of jumping ahead just a little, which is good. We're starting to think about that.
But that's the cool thing about like the inquiry stuff, because you can go from that to not always, and it's not like a hard and fast rule that you have to always go into the problem. But you can build on them. So is there anyone else who would like to share kind of like what some of those questions that came up, or the question tasks that you guys came up with, the inquiry tasks?
Our group kind of talked first what our different subject areas were, and two of us were in the science area. And so the suggestion was, what about something that is a buzzword for today's kids, and one of those being global warming. And so we brainstormed questions that kids might have about global warming, and then we kind of voted on one that we thought like outshone the rest. And we chose how does global warming affect ecosystems? And one of the reasons we like that is because many of the standards in several grade levels have a focus on ecosystems and food webs and things where that could easily be developed within the set standards for the grade levels.
That's awesome. And I love how you guys are saying how instead of just like a specific, you all are making open-ended questions, not closed-ended questions, which are what we're really looking for when we're doing inquiry-based tasks. So Now that we've looked at inquiry-based tasks,
we are going to go and jump into problem-based learning. We're now going to watch a video on problem-based learning with John Spencer again. And then we'll do a little discussion, and then we're actually going to dive in and create a problem-based assignment.
Problem-based learning in less than 5 minutes. I promise. In the 1980s, somebody decided that haircuts were way too messy. So they combined the hair trimmer and the vacuum cleaner, and we ended up with the Flowbee. And I remember begging my parents for a Flowbee, and they said no, because they thought I would use it on the dog, and they were probably right. But the idea there is pretty clear, that you can solve problems in unique ways. And that's the core idea of problem-based learning. Number one, the need for problem-based learning. School exists in a one-size-fits-all factory model where students are expected to passively consume content. But here's the thing, kids aren't widgets, and one-size-fits-all is great for socks, but lousy for minds. Kids need to dream and wonder and imagine. They need to design and build and tinker, and they need to think critically and solve complex problems. For years, the model has involved going to school, being compliant, getting into college, and then climbing the corporate ladder. But the ladder is now a maze, and our students need to know how to navigate the complexity of a global society. In other words, students need to be empowered to solve real world problems. And that's why we have problem-based learning. Number two, the history of problem-based learning. Problem-based learning began at Case Western University in the 1950s, although it wasn't called that at the time. And the goal was to provide real-world problems for medical students to solve. It soon spread to other medical schools and eventually made its way into business, law, engineering, and education. And by the 1960s, you could find elements of problem-based learning within the new social studies framework of Macialis and Cox, as well as Herbert Thielen's group investigation model. Problem-based learning fits well within the social family of education because of the emphasis on real-world problems and human systems. It's not surprising that many of the problem-based learning theorists cite John Dewey's notion of democratic education, as well as Paulo Freire's concept of critical pedagogy. In other words, kids need to be engaged with solving problems within their world. And here's the description of problem-based learning. There are 4 different phases. Number one, you present or identify the problem. In some cases, the teacher decides on the problem. In other cases, individual students or the entire classroom community presents the initial problem. Phase number 2, they develop a plan for solving the problem. Here, students work collaboratively in this phase where they figure out what they will do in order to solve the problem. In some cases, it's a really small plan of action, but sometimes they might engage in research, brainstorming, and ideation. And in a few cases, they might even decide to build a product. The next phase is the implementation of the plan. In this phase, students test out their plan to see if they can solve the problem. And then finally, they move to the last phase where they evaluate the implementation. Here, students analyze the results and they also reflect on the process. Now, here's the ideal context for problem-based learning. Problem-based learning works best when students solve authentic real-world problems. Math teacher Dan Meyer warns against solving problems that contain pseudo-context, where students solve problems that don't actually reflect the way the world exists. So it's important that the problems feel real to the students. In social studies, students might broker peace in a war simulation. In math, they might determine the most efficient route for a trip. In language arts, they might figure out if a novel should be adapted into a movie. And in science, they might do a science fair project. But the key idea here is that it is not project-based learning, it's problem-based. And that's because you don't have to design a product, you're simply solving a problem. Ideally, students will solve problems that actually exist in their own world. And here's where the technology comes in. Our devices have a slew of apps that once required additional time and resources. And the problem-based learning provides a model that taps into both the connective and creative capacity of technology so that students can access the tools and the information to solve these real world problems. So that is basically problem-based learning in less than 5 minutes.
Okay, just a real quick review. Well, she's putting up the PowerPoint. From the video, remember, problems end with something being solved. So there needs to be something being solved when you're working on problem-based learning. Problems should engage the students, should be an interesting topic, confidence in solving ability. Questions should spark curiosity, and learning is structured around a big idea. So those are some key things to think about when you're coming up with your problem-based learning. One thing that I've done, and I've had my students, if we're reading a book about refugees, like The Refugee by, I can't remember off the top of my head the author, but doing a project, a problem-based learning project around refugees coming into, let's say, San Antonio. And the problem is they don't know San Antonio. So how are we going to help them to learn about San Antonio? So that was kind of a problem-based learning activity that I have done before, just to give it a quick example. So let's go ahead and look at how we're going to do this in a breakout. We're going to do this in a breakout room. So I'm going to put you back in the breakout rooms. You'll be in the same breakout rooms. You're going to create a new problem-based task, or you can also use your inquiry-based concept and create a problem-based task from that inquiry-based project if it's able to be done. Sometimes your inquiry-based isn't able to be put into a problem-based learning activity, but if you can do that. So your directions are to design a problem-based lesson, state step by step how you would identify resources to solve the problem, and then suggest a solution to the problem. How is it going to be solved? So I'm going to give you about 7 minutes in your groups to come up with an idea. If you don't have it fully drawn out, that's fine, but at least you have an idea that you can share with us so we can go back to our classrooms with some ideas on what we could do. Does anyone have questions before I put you back into your breakout rooms? So it looks like it'll be about 3 to 4 people per group. I'm gonna go ahead and open up the rooms, and Rebecca and I can pop in just to make sure that you're understanding if you have any questions as you're starting to work. Let me double check on the time. It's 7 minutes, okay. So rooms are open. It looks like we're all back. So if would anyone in group 1 or room 1, like Elena, Beth, is it Gina? I'm not saying that right. Glory or Shalom would like to kind of talk about what you guys came up with for your problem-based learning task.
We decided to springboard off our global warming idea. And then we kind of hit on the idea that that trees help with maintaining our environment because of their process with carbon dioxide and oxygen, but that we use a lot of trees in our, and specifically we lean toward our buildings, our houses, especially in the West. And so one of our problems was what other materials besides trees could be used to build homes in order to help alleviate the overuse of trees. And we decided that students could brainstorm ideas, and then we could bring in experts from the field, engineers and you know, other building experts, architects, et cetera, from their community, to talk with them about what they do and what makes a good a building resource good. And then students could even present their ultimate research and findings, and have these same experts come back and give them feedback on their thoughts.
Cool activity. I love it. Group 2, room 2, anyone like to share what you guys came up with for your problem-based learning task?
Am I speaking? I guess I was talking the most, so maybe I should speak.
All good, all good.
So the way that we kind of took it, again, I'm a social studies teacher, so we're doing social studies themed topics. I was thinking about citizenship specifically at the local level of our school. We have some new changes this past year, namely new principals with new ideas, and some of them work and some of them don't. And it's their first year being here, so of course they have to prove themselves. And they really know what's going on. And those of us who've been there since the building opened, well, we have suggestions. So I was thinking, the kids are the ones that are experiencing the difficulties that new things like you carry your 500-pound backpack with you all day, you don't get a locker. They're the ones experiencing the effects of these problems. And so I thought, well, what if I ask them about what kind of problems do you see when you're in the hallway? What sort of problems do you feel you have when you're navigating around the school? Or, and be more open-ended, and not necessarily me just catering it to that, but like, what are some problems that you see around the school that you feel like the teachers don't notice, So, and then I've got a 7th grade class that I've taught them last year, and I already know them, they already know me, I already know the parents. So I can do something that's unstructured with them in more safety. So I was thinking, like, with that class, I could treat them like my brain trust and be like, all right, so we've identified some things that we feel are, problems around the school with our daily lives. Why do you think we have these problems? Why are they happening? What is causing them? What do we have that could address those causes, and what can we do to solve them? And I think the video was talking about how the kids need to feel like they're authentic problems. So, I mean, I could give them abstract social studies problems about, how people in the past solve things, but I mean, that's still abstract for them and not directly related to them. So solving problems in their daily lives that they feel are authentic already might be a good stepping stone to get them into the problem-based projects where I want to go later, but I need to start where they're at. And I think we had Maria had some interesting ideas with that too, because she's also got kids that she's taught before and in previous years, and has that relationship.
Yeah, I shared how I taught a group of students in 1st grade and 3rd grade, and then again in 6th grade. So I had that relationship building with families, and so I sparked these conversations. But letting them take the ownership of the discussion and you just being kind of like the facilitator and like was mentioned earlier, a Socratic circle type of flow. And then checking for understanding in their own ways, and then you just analyze your data like that.
James, can I say I like how applicable your problem-based learning task is? I think the kids would get a kick out of it, especially when you tell them, write a letter to your principal about these problems that you're having, and see what happens with, going further.
You're
I-
nicer than me. I was gonna say, what do you think your parents should write in their letter to the principal? But that's me.
Good job. I love it.
I could do both.
Okay, so we're going to be jumping into project-based learning now, but I have a little did you know to kind of get us thinking about project-based learning. So did you know in the 1980s, MarTech, a bioscience tech company, partnered with NASA to develop a nutritional supplement to sustain astronauts during long-duration space flights? The supplement was made in part of microalgae, high in DHA and ARA, two fatty acids important for infant development. MarTech made a spin-off of the supplement now found in nearly 95% of infant formula on the market today. So just a little tidbit to kind of get us thinking about project-based learning. So now we're going to look at what project. So we're going to be watching another video by John Spencer about what project-based learning is, and then we'll discuss it, and then we'll be talking a little more about the project-based learning and the parts.
Project-based learning
in less than 5 minutes. So this is me in the 8th grade. I was a combination of shy and nerdy. My whole goal was to remain invisible. I had one friend, this kid named Matt. We were two nerds in a pod. And fortunately for me, he had perfect attendance until one day he didn't. He was sick, and it wasn't a big deal, but I stood in the cafeteria looking out at the sea of students, hoping someone would invite me over. But it didn't happen. I hid in the boys' restroom for the next 24 minutes. But it had worked. I was invisible. But not to Mrs. Smoot or Mr. Darrow. They knew me. They knew I cared about social justice and baseball and history, and so they invited me to do a History Day project. And although it was fun, it was also terrifying. I had to plan my entire project and track my own progress. I had to figure out what questions to ask and where to find the answer. I had to narrow down the topic to something I cared about. In this case, Jackie Robinson and the integration of baseball. I wrote letters to newspapers and made phone calls to former players. I remember picking up the phone, my hands trembling as I read aloud my pre-recorded script and waited for the stranger to respond. I eventually worked on a slide presentation. That's when the most nerve-wracking moment occurred. I sat in a radio studio and I heard the script that I had just recorded, and I hated it. I'm not doing it, I said. But Mrs. Smoot looked me in the eyes and said, When you hide your voice, you rob the world of your creativity. And so I continued. I went ahead and I shared it with my class. And then I entered the district competition and the state competition and eventually went to Washington, D.C. And although I didn't realize it at the time, Mrs. Smoot was why I became an educator. This project helped me grow into a creative thinker and problem solver. And that experience is why I ultimately embraced project-based learning. Project-based learning involves learning through projects rather than doing culminating projects. It involves student choice in design instead of just following a set of instructions. It includes student inquiry rather than pre-planned questions. It includes peer and self-assessment rather than only relying on teacher assessment. And it includes student ownership of the process rather than just teacher ownership of the process. The Buck Institute identifies the following 7 project design elements. Number 1, challenging problem or question. It has to start with something that truly engages students to solve a problem. Number 2, time to ask questions and explore the answers and engage in meaningful research. Number 3, authentic. It has to feel real to the students and tie into an actual context. Number 4, student voice and choice. They need to be the ones designing the entire project the entire time. Number 5, reflection. There needs to be frequent reflection along with a final reflection at the end. Number 6, critique and revision. Students need to engage in peer critique and constant iterative revision. And number 7, public product. They need to launch their work to an authentic audience. Now note that project-based learning can work in tandem with other pedagogical models such as inquiry-based learning, design thinking, and problem-based learning. But the key idea remains the same, that students are engaged in meaningful projects, and through that, they learn at a deeper level.
Unmute. So thinking about back at that video, there are 7 design elements of project-based learning, which we're going to be going over a little more in depth in just a few minutes. There's a guiding question that's overarching, and this drives your project-based learning. That question drives the learning that happens. I am going to put in the chat the article that this next piece is based off of, so you have access to that article if you want to read more on the gold standard PBL, which is those 7 based elements.
It's already on there, Karen.
Thank you. You got ahead of me.
So the article that Carol was referencing is discussing the gold standard for project-based learning. And these are the 7 essential project design elements. So you're probably going to start with a challenging problem or question. You're going to go to sustained inquiry, which is where we're generating all those other questions and refining, right? We're going to have authenticity, which is what we discussed. It has to be something that's authentic that will help them in the real world. We do have to have student voice and choice. So students are going to be guiding their learning. They're going to choose what direction they're going to be going. Obviously, we're going to guide them, but they're going to have some autonomy with their learning. There's the reflection piece where we're actually going back and looking at, hey, what is it that we're doing? Can we do this better? Is there something that we can tweak or change? There's the critique or revision, which basically means we need to make sure that there's an opportunity for our students to present their project and that they can actually have that critique coming back where they can make those changes and maybe something they haven't seen before, or they're able to improve upon what it is that they created. And then you come up with a public product, which would actually be like the final product. And if you kind of look at this, this is definitely modeling the engineering model, which is the way that we produce stuff. So we definitely start with trying to solve problems or having questions and trying to answer those questions or solve those problems. And when we go through this, the design elements, we actually come up with a more refined product at the end. And as you can see, like what happens with different companies who constantly are creating new product, right? Or maybe they'll say like, it's new and improved. Well, I mean, if it's new, it can't be improved, but I would definitely say it's something that was improved upon. And now it's a different product that we are able to say is better than the last one. They'll do different things to make sure that whatever their public product is received more willingly by the public, right? So that being said, this is coming from this gold standard PBL is coming from the article which was shared with you in the chat if you'd like to read a little bit more about it. And now we're going to be looking at reassessing. So now that you've had that discussion with your group and we kind of talked about inquiry-based, now we talked about problem-based, and you were able to kind of refine some of those questions to create a problem-based learning task. Look at your inquiry-based or your problem-based lesson. And what would you have to do to turn it into a project-based assignment? What do you think you would have to do to turn it into a problem-based assignment? Or is it possible? If not, then what could we do differently so that we can get there, right? So again, like we had said, not every single one of the inquiry-based or problem-based is going to become a project-based task, but can you change it? What is it that you can change that would turn it into a project-based task or assignment? And then what do you think your driving question would be? Because we do need to know that when we're talking about a project-based assignment, it has to be guided by a question. So we need to make sure that we know that students can investigate and ask further questions and find resources to help them complete the task. We know that all of our project-based assignments are going to have a driving question. You cannot have a project-based assignment without a driving question. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to jot down some of your notes of what you've learned so far and what will help you to create a project-based lesson and ideas that you should have that you've had or you've generated so far. And then consider your inquiry and problem-based lessons, and then are they shiftable, right? Are we able to do it? If not, then what can we do or what can be changed to make it shiftable? And just to keep in mind, not all of them can. So I'm going to go ahead and give you 3 minutes to go ahead and write that down. How can you change what you already have to turn it into a project-based assignment? I see that Alana wrote in our chat, we could have students and groups present to the experts and the experts can decide on the best ones, a friendly competition. It's funny you say that, Alana, because at a middle school, and I know I've shared this with Carol previously, there's a middle school here who took on the task that was given by Nike to design a better shoe. And I'm not sure exactly what all went into it, but I know that it was like a project-based learning assignment. And they went ahead and they took it on and they started to design this shoe. So we're talking the experts who are able to make these shoes real. And they designed it. They said why they were able to justify what the modifications would be that they made to the shoe. And Nike actually picked it up and they did design that shoe. So that's pretty cool. And I have James talking about a project for my social studies class could be a class petition for change. And that's a product, definitely, because it's social studies and we're living history right now, definitely. Have students, Maria said, have students create a newsletter for the grade level. I did this with 6th graders and it became a monthly newsletter. Definitely, that's something that you can do with them and it's a product that they can do to share out with what's going on.
What I did with when I did my studying the immigrants that are coming to San Antonio, having the students create a brochure of things that they need to know about San Antonio, like the public system that they for transportation, where Catholic Charities and those other places that help them to get resources, places to eat, places, that type of thing. So they create a brochure to help them to understand what's important in San Antonio to help them.
Definitely. So now that we've kind of generated those ideas of what you could use as a project-based learning assignment, I'm going to have you go back into your breakout rooms and kind of just follow up with your group that you were in. And you can discuss a topic that would be suited for project-based learning. And so again, like we said, it can be based on the inquiry or it can be based on the problem that you guys had already come up with. If it is able to be used, then you can go ahead and jump off of that to create your project. If it's not, then you can go ahead and generate an idea for something that a topic that we all suited for project-based learning. And then remember, you have to state the problem and you're going to have a driving question. So within that breakout, I'd like you to definitely find that and then ask, what steps would you have students take to complete the project on the topic? What does sustained inquiry look like for this project? And how do students derive authenticity from this project? And I know I heard James definitely already, I can see these ideas percolating in his head. And I see that also Maria is getting ready to talk about stuff like that with like her newsletter. So we're gonna go ahead and have you go out into your breakouts. Does anybody have any questions? Was it clear? And if you need anything, please let us know. So we're gonna go ahead and open up those breakouts so you can discuss.
Okay, it looks like we're all back. So we're gonna go ahead and do a little show and tell. Each group will get a chance to share when you share, give us your topic, the driving question or questions that you had, the product that you came up with, the audience that's intended for, and the mode of student presentation. So how are they going to present this information? Would someone from group 1 like to share what you guys came up with for your project-based task?
I can share for us. We decided to continue on with the theme that we had before, which started as global warming, and then the problem based around what other materials besides trees could be used to build homes. And our guiding question is, what is the best material to use to build a small, low carbon footprint home? The product would be a pet home or a model human home in a small, model size, where we would use materials at our disposal, possibly recycling, and then they would create, not only create this home, but they would also write a, like a proposal or there's apparently a model for writing called Raft, where they could, reflect on their, what they need and who their audience is to explain their product. And then we would have the experts come in and assess each of the different homes and see which ones were the most sustainable.
I love it, especially the writing piece. Everyone needs to be doing more writing in their classrooms. That's my plug as a reading specialist. Group 2, would you like to share what you came up with?
Maria, you want to take
I
this
won't
one
go
and
in,
talk a
yeah,
lot?
I won't go in that order, but I'll just splurge things out as they come to my mind. But somebody in a Henna group mentioned, school issues or things they see in the school that can be addressed within the student body. Aside from having them write, having them create an art behind it. So having them create visuals behind what they write about, and I mentioned a newsletter that we had for my 6th graders. So I had about eight students who would collaborate to this one Canva, and they were very excited about having Canva, but they all collaborated to this one Canva. It was a dual language campus. So I did have Spanish speakers and English speakers, and as well as students learning, both language simultaneously, as this was, going back to kinder. Some of them had been through the 50-50 model, etc. But I had an editor in English and an editor in Spanish. So they would edit, and then of course I would give like the final skim. And if I still found errors, I would have them go back and fix those 3 errors that's still on whether it's punctuation or capitalization, etc. And then we had students do like sports section. So because they're 6th grade, they would have volleyball games, basketball games. So somebody would write like a recap of that month's like sports, because this was every month. A small piece on sports, and then somebody did the visuals to it, to the newsletter, to make more connection with like real world their surroundings, no? And then we had somebody do poetry, because through the school year, I did a book study on a Spanish and English text called The Circuit in English and Cajas de Cartón in Spanish, which was a phenomenal read for their age level, because that sparked a lot of things that we talked about, because I did both SLA and social studies in English. So we talked about more broad, topics, but I was telling them that just take patience and time. So it could be something that they roll out over 2 weeks, and they will be invested in that, and provide an exemplar to what you could show them at the beginning of the lesson.
I love it. Thank you very much for sharing your ideas. We're going to go ahead and show a couple other resources that we have. A good plug for Share My Lesson, which is something that AFT has. It's a great website if you've never been on there, that you can get a lot of lesson ideas, and they do have some lesson ideas for PBL. And then pblworks.org is another resource that you can go to find other PBL resource ideas that you have. So you might want to just take a snapshot of that, so you have those two. Anyone can join Share My Lesson for now. It used to be that you had to be an AFT member, but now anyone can join. So share that out to your colleagues. Great lesson plans that are done by teachers. So we're going to look at what are driving questions. Oh, we're going to do the final thoughts. Never mind. Okay, go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay, so just want to make sure that you guys have clear that we know what driving questions are. So we need to know when we have our driving questions for our PBLs, are we talking about philosophical or debatable questions? And then are they product oriented or are they role oriented? So when we're trying to do a project, we're trying to see, is there a product that's supposed to come out of it? Or is it supposed to help fulfill a role for something, right? And then again, like where I was talking about the question formulation technique, that's just the process you're going through to refine the questions that you come up with. And remember, when we're starting, we just ask questions. It doesn't matter what question it is. And then you can go through, sort through them and decide, are they actually something that we want to proceed with? Is it an open-ended or closed-ended? And if it's a closed-ended, it's not something that we want to proceed with. We need those open-ended questions.
So we just have some final thoughts. Does anyone have any questions for us about inquiry-based, problem-based, project-based learning? We can look back at the session focus to see, the objectives, did we follow through with the objectives? We delineate, the structural differences. So we talked about each of the structural differences so you can understand the difference between inquiry-based, problem-based, and project-based learning. We actually went through and you were able to create some assignments and get some ideas that you can take back to your classroom that are research-based. And then we also talked about how we can support students effectively as they work through each of these approaches. So I think we really did follow through with our objectives. Hopefully you guys got some ideas that you can use later on, or maybe you have something you can go in tomorrow and change your lesson plans. I'm going to do this instead.
I have a quick thought. So just going back to the initial question that somebody asked, how do you do this if in a district that, does give script? Because that happened to me too. That was my first year, my second year. I taught like the first 3 years at one school, and then the next 7 years at another school, but it was scripted. So how do you get around a curriculum that's handed to us, and want to expand, students thinking beyond the 4 classrooms kind of thing?
That is hard. I probably would get in trouble if I said this, but I would close my door and do what's best for the kids. That's just me.
And there's also leeway within warm-ups. If the warm-ups aren't scripted, you could bring in at least maybe an inquiry-based or problem-based and short little teeny spurts.
You could also do it at the end of the year, because sometimes you might have a little more flexibility if you're in a test grade at the end of the year after testing, when everyone's done. That's a good time to bring out these types of hands-on projects, because it gets the kids interested. And I know May and June can be very difficult. So if you can get them to do some hands-on things, if you can get away with it. But I know some campuses and some districts are very particular about what you teach. But hopefully that gives you some ideas on how you can try to do this. And
if you have time for SEL, that might be another time that you can do something like that too, like generating ideas for what's one way that I can calm myself down, or you can go on doing that kind of stuff. So just kind of playing with the time that you actually have. You can even possibly speak to, if you're in a primary school, possibly talking to the coaches and seeing if there's a way that you can incorporate whatever you're doing into their lessons. Because I know our PE coaches are great at asking us, what are you guys teaching? So that way we can kind of try to put it into what we're doing, and just kind of trying to collaborate with them, or even when they go to library and stuff like that.
Also, I know my district's really big on STEM in elementary, where they have a STEM class, and I'm sure they do a lot of these things. So maybe talk to the STEM teacher and say, hey, what are you guys doing in STEM that maybe I can try to sneak in some way into my classroom as well. So those are just some ideas. I know it's very hard when you're being told basically what you have to teach word for word. So we do have an evaluation, and there will be a text sent to you that we just found out that there will be a text sent to you with the link as well. I can put it in the chat. So if you don't have your phone available, I can put the link in the chat as well for you. And while you're doing that, I would like to invite you. I am the site coordinator for Northside AFT. And we have a great opportunity that is over Zoom coming up at the end of this month. So since it's Zoom, anyone in the state, anyone in the country really could come to it. So if you have people that are interested in learning more about how to work with students with challenges, Rebecca and I will be presenting that one on a Saturday morning from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. You have to sign up with the link because I will be going in and emailing those that signed up with the virtual link. It'll be over Zoom. So we would love to see you, get some ideas on how to work with students that have some challenging, and it's not really challenging behaviors, it's things that they come to us with, like home life, maybe they're bilingual, those types of things as well. So that's just another opportunity. I do give out certificates. You'll get a certificate to send to your district to get credit as well for that one. And you'll get a certificate for this one emailed out to you, at some point. And I know Jamie could probably talk a little more about that.
Oh, I had too many screens open. Sorry. Yes, good. I know I was trying to click out of everything because I do attendance on the back side. I've already created your certificates and you will receive an email from me after we get off this session with your certificate attached. And then Dr. Morales will gather all of the handouts that Carol and Rebecca provided and send you a separate email with all of that information attached. And we will have our next session in 2 weeks. We will not do one next week on September the 11th, but we will the following week.
Which I think Rebecca and I are presenting that one again. So you'll see us again in 2 weeks.
You can hop back in 2 weeks and see Rebecca and Carol again. And thank you, Rebecca and Carol. And thank everyone for that participated tonight. I know you all have been teaching all day. It's been a tough day today in education, just with the things that are, happened in Georgia today. Unfortunately, that's the reality of our system. And so it's very heartbreaking. So with that, I just want you to know that we here at Texas AFT and AFT National are fighting for laws to protect us in the classroom as well as our students, because this is not something that should be a daily occurrence in our country. So with that, Carol and Rebecca, thank you so much for taking the time out and preparing, because there's a lot of preparation that goes behind the scenes that participants don't necessarily see. And we hope to see everyone in 2 weeks. So if you all have any final thoughts, go ahead.
I think this link will open up. Let me double check. It's the students with challenges at the end of the month. So I did put in the chat the link to the Google form to sign up for the one at the end of the month if you would like to join Northside AFT on that training as well. So I'll just put a little note here that that's the students with challenges sign up.